Hello, Booktube. Among the many hundreds and hundreds of YouTube and Booktube videos that I follow, the channels that I follow, I have been seeing a bumper crop lately of 2021 year goals and resolution videos of all kinds, just all kinds. The minimalism channel is promising to have even less. The maximalism channel is promising to have even more. The bro science weightlifting models promising to do better on their macros and their protein shakes and whatnot, making all kinds of New Year's resolutions except the ones that count, like maybe make one video in 2021 in which you don't lie your effing face off to your viewers. Maybe spend 1 minute in 2021 not fleecing your customers by selling them a healthy lifestyle that you don't in any way partake of. Maybe, if you're one of those 20-something weightlifter dudes, maybe make a standard, tried and true New Year's resolution of trying to quit nicotine, since they're all endless tobacco addicts. Nevertheless, they make all sorts of resolution videos. It's just not those. Business dude videos promising to expand their empire in 2021. And of course, on Booktube, many bookish resolution videos, people really doing two things at the same time, looking back at the resolutions that they had for 2020, the worst year in any of our lives, the worst year in modern history, and projecting forwards to 2021 and thinking what those resolutions might look like in the new year. I saw Britta Bola, for instance, made a great video. I'll try to remember to leave a link to it down below, where she reviews a lot of her goals for 2020. And of course, you don't know what the future holds, so those goals have to be done largely playfully, largely tongue-in-cheek, because, well, none of us expected 2020 to take the shape that it did. Not even me. And I watch those kinds of videos with a little bit of wistfulness, because I don't do anything like that myself. I don't throw grappling hooks forward to the new year from an old year at all. In fact, I tend to disappear at the end of every year. I'm coming closer and closer to doing that now. But then I got to thinking that I can daydream about 2021, and I can also, as a form of that daydreaming, I can look back at 2020. A lot of the ideas, the daydreams, the visions that I might have for 2021 are the same as they would be for 2020. So I thought I'd go through a list of those and talk about them a bit, and see what shape they take, what reflections I have on them, and maybe provoke the same response from you. Maybe. I have 10 of them here, roughly 10 things that were quasi goals for 2020, and maybe if I were in a different ritual, in a different position, I would make them goals for 2021. And number one, of course, is to read more books. My goal at the beginning of 2020 was to exceed my numerical total of books read from 2019, which was a personal best. And at first I thought that wasn't going to happen. At first I thought I was going to fall far short because of the pandemic, oddly enough. You would think that if we were all trapped in our homes in March with nothing to do and no legitimate reason to leave, plenty of legitimate reason to stay in, that the reading would go up. But I think I'm not the only person who found that psychologically shocking to an extent that initially prohibited reading or sent me to rereading candy. But for me, that changed pretty quickly, and suddenly the vision was true. Suddenly I was spending enormous amounts more time reading, because almost all of my real-world obligations, they were slim on the ground to begin with, but almost all of them disappeared completely as 2020 got cooking along. So looking back on that goal, I did exceed 2019's reading goal by a handy amount. And I can hope for the same in 2021, absolutely. Number two is to review more books. I'm already a prolific reviewer, both at my own journal, Open Letters Review, and also at a bunch of other journals, newspapers and places all around the place. I'm already prolific at it. I'm not one of these hothouse flowers like some of my colleagues that chin strokes and ponders for 2 months in order to divulge a piece of latest hard-won wisdom. But even so, even though I'm prolific, I could do more. I could review more, especially considering that, as I mentioned, Open Letters Review is an online literary journal, an inheritor of Open Letters Monthly, which I helped to found. And I'm on the masthead. I'm one of the editors for Open Letters Review. So I could have a review every day there if I wanted. And I didn't do that in 2020. And I really should have. But in addition to that, I would also like to find more venues. I'm always on the hunt for more venues, more places where my work can appear outside of Open Letters Review. For instance, as usual, as I always do when I bring this subject up, if you know such a venue, or even the possibility of one, if your local town newspaper runs original copy, that is the key. You don't need to know somebody in order to give me a private email or something like that. The only thing you need to do to give me a useful heads up is to tell me that your local journal, whatever it is, runs original copy, that they don't just reprint stuff from the wires or that they find on the web or whatever, but that they actually run stuff that's original to their journal and that appears nowhere else. That's all the go-ahead that I would need, although literary websites is another venue that I have not explored at all. Not at all. And I would like to do that. I would like to write more reviews than I did in 2020. So maybe that would apply in 2021. Then number 3 is to continue to diversify my reading. And I am probably alone on the entire platform of YouTube, and especially Booktube, in not meaning that in any kind of virtue signaling way. I do not mean that in a quota way. I am not looking at my reading and saying, well, I don't have enough brown people, or I don't have anyone from mainland China, or I don't have enough people from mainland China, or there's a particular Inuit group that probably has a robust 10,000-year-old literary tradition, and I've never read anything of it. I've never understood that. These things are not demographic studies, so a book by an Inuit writer is going to be a book. It's not going to have any inherent Inuit qualities to it, or if it does, then it's pandering on the part of the author and is best left alone rather than read. But the only reason I bring it up is because on almost all of the Bookish Goals videos that I have seen some fig leaf poised in the direction of greater diversity. And it's never actually been a problem of mine because I'm an omnivorous reader, and I'll read anything that I encounter. Or at least that's what I like to say. But my own version of reading diversely, of diversifying my reading, is to make good on that, which is to be constantly expanding the kinds of things I read. I don't care about the sexual orientation or the bedroom practices of the person who writes the book, and I am not going to research it. I don't care what the person who writes the book says on Twitter, or if they have a Twitter account, or what they've liked, or what they haven't liked, what they've been silent about. I don't care if a book is written by a Republican. I don't even care if a book is written by a Trump supporter, provided the book is not Trump support. And I don't care about genetic testing either. I don't care at all whether or not a person who was dating the opposite gender vigorously and publicly during the 90s on all the 90s social media equivalents. So there's a broad visual record now says that they are intersex, or that they are an alien pod person. They don't actually have a gender of any kind. I don't care about any of that stuff. I'm not going to research any of that. I only care about the book on the page. And when it comes to that, I could broaden my horizons quite a bit. I largely ignore history and economics, for instance, when I don't know all that much about history and business and economics, but I know enough to make a toehold in a general interest book. I largely ignore self-help books, even the ones that are published by mainstream presses. I read some of them, but I could read a lot more, and especially the infinity of indie books, where I barely make a scratch. None of us really dig deep there, and we all should. I should definitely do that. So indie books especially, I would like to I wanted to read a lot more of them in 2020 than I did, and I would in 2021 probably want to read even more. Make a regular habit of it. Thing number 4 is to publish a book. I'm helping. In 2020, I was helping with 3 books, with their gestation, their planning, even in one case, the prose. And one of those has vanished from the radar completely, just disappeared. A little bit concerning, but nothing I can do about it. I did everything I could do. and I'm ready to hand if such help is wanted again. And I would like to think that I would continue to do that in 2021, that I would continue to help. One of the weird little gifts that I am willing to say I have is the gift of midwifing books into existence. I have a talent, however pronounced it might be, for sniffing them out in the potential writers and then dragging them out of those writers with chains and hooks. And I like doing it. I very much like doing that. I love the feeling of it. So I'd like to think that I would continue that in 2021. But I'm talking about something more than that. I'm talking about publishing my own book, or more than one. My own book as an ebook, where I get tech-savvy friends to do all of the layout. I get art-savvy friends to do the cover design. And I write and then rewrite and then polish and then lovingly edit the prose and publish a book under my own name. I have yet to do that on any of the independent platforms. I would probably pick Amazon. And I have yet to do that with any of those. And I planned on doing it in 2019. I planned on doing it in 2020. I didn't do it. I'm a lot closer to that now. And I would like to think that in 2021, I would do that, even more than just publish a book. How much fun it would be if yesterday I mentioned that, or the other day I mentioned that, that some indie publishers have an infrastructure set up. They have conquered all of the little sniggety problems to do with self-publishing, and they have that, all of that stuff is a process now, and it's smooth, so that they can concentrate on generating prose and just putting it out there for their readers, and with no slow, stately progression of mainstream publishing, just as soon as it is ready and to your liking. Imagine if I had an infrastructure. If I had that kind of an infrastructure, so I had a cover designer, and I had an editor, and I had a typesetter, and all of that stuff was simply there. And all it required was a new book. Oh my, the amount of stuff that I could do if I had that. Right, 9/10 of the problem of the book that I have in mind, publishing under my own name, 9/10 of the problems there are infrastructure. Imagine if I solved that and made it just a smooth, breathing in and out process like a lot of these indie publishers, these indie writers have done. That is something to dream about. And along those lines, number 6 would be along those lines, which is would be to keep up with the public writing. NaNoWriMo, Camp NaNoWriMo, maybe other writing challenges. Keep up the public communal writing. That is just so much fun. It is just such a wonderful addition to the writing life that I would hope that I would continue with that. I certainly did it in 2020. To my great satisfaction, I succeeded in my writing goals for Camp NaNoWriMo and NaNoWriMo in 2020. And it was, in addition to being very satisfying, you're suddenly satisfying. You have a literary project that you dreamed up and that you then did. In addition to that, I learned a lot. I tried pantsing for the first time and learned a lot about the process of writing, as poncy as that sounds. And in addition to that, there's the satisfaction of having that stuff done. So having a project done instead of just sitting there in the back burner of your mind. So I'd like to think I'd do more of that as well. Then number 7 is familiar. If I made New Year's resolutions, this would have been a New Year's resolution for 5 years, 6 years, and that is Goodreads. Goodreads, the sprawling, sometimes toxic, often wonderful community where thousands and thousands and thousands of dedicated readers gather. So many of you are big fans of Goodreads. You might have your issues with it, but you're big fans of it. You're on it every day. You have reading groups, reading challenges. You follow the reviews of lots of other people. You have the app on your phone. That is a wonderful, involved, bookish community full of enthusiasm for books in all of their infinite variety. And I love the idea. I don't know why I don't love the reality. I don't know why I haven't embraced Goodreads. Every year I say this. Every year I tell myself, well, this is going to be the year when you do that. When you go to your Goodreads profile, which I think says that I've read 250 books in my life. I think it says something along those lines. Where you go to your Goodreads profile and you spruce it up. Probably my Goodreads profile says that I still have my old dogs. It probably makes no mention of Frida Bean. And spruce up the titles and add reviews. Good Lord, I should have a review of every book I read on Goodreads. Or at least something that has worked for me in the past. a brief teaser of a review and then a link to wherever the review appears. So the Boston Globe or the Washington Post or wherever. I should do that. I should make full use of Goodreads. I should have the app on my phone, and I don't. So I kick myself here at the end of 2020 that I didn't do that. Again, imagine it. Oh, imagine all the decades I went as a reader and a writer and a reviewer and an advocate of books, a bookseller, dreaming in my wildest dreams about some sort of community, a huge, sprawling community of all the readers in the world. And now it exists, and I'm ignoring it. Unbearable. So I would like to hope that if things remain the same in 2021, that I would finally deal with that and enjoy it. It's not like it would be a chore. I would end up enjoying it. I know I would. So Goodreads is number 7. Then number 8 is more Booktube. Of course, I wanted to embrace Booktube even more closely in 2020. Of course, 2020 threw me some curveballs, as it did all of us, but I think I managed to do that. Made a lot of videos in 2020, gained a lot of subscribers in 2020. I'd like to think that in 2021 I would do the same thing, and maybe with more variety. Zoom chats, maybe more read-alongs. I sort of petered out on read-alongs on this channel. I could revive those and stick with them. And also live streams, which I've yet to try on this channel. I had it pointed out to me. Someone pointed out to me how easy it is to do. It's very easy to do. It's literally one button on the YouTube app on my phone. So it wouldn't be hard to do. I haven't tried it. I gather that a lot of booktubers who do live streams don't use YouTube. They use one of the app that shows its watermark in every video is StreamYards or Streamlabs or something like that. That probably costs money or is downloadable or something like that. I haven't looked into it. I haven't looked into it at all. And they look like a lot of fun. The ones that I managed to partake in are always lots of fun. So I can't help but wonder if maybe one would be fun on my channel if we did a live stream every week. That might be a lot of fun. More regular guests for Zoom chats, not only authors, but also booktubers. I would love that. Just more variety. You know, the silver lining of 2020 was that it showed us all some of the potentials of the technology that we just had lying around, that we were forced to use. We were forced to come to grips with it. And there's lots of potential there. So I would like to think, again, in 2021, that I would do that, that I would embrace some of that potential. Then number 9 is something I mentioned the other day, Calibre. There's a website, an app called Calibre that is a way for you to curate and manage your ebook collection. I have many more ebooks in 2020 than I had in 2019 by an exponential factor. And they do need managing. I largely just use the search function to find the thing I'm looking for, but they do need managing. And Calibre has a lot more functionality than just managing your ebooks. And I every time that I download, I just recently downloaded it onto my MacBook, because apparently there's some sort of 3-step folderol to getting it to work on a Chromebook. I haven't really looked into that either, but I downloaded the app, downloaded just fine on my MacBook. And I had downloaded it half a year ago on my MacBook Air and gave up on it. And when I was downloading it on my MacBook Pro, I thought, why did you give up on that anyway? And I actually thought when it was downloading, well, you don't remember the reason, but it will almost certainly present itself when you try to use the thing, because you'll run into the same problem again. And I did, which is that I can't for the life of me figure out how to tell Calibre that it is connected to an external library of ebooks. I can't for the life of me figure out if I connect it via a cord from an iPad that has thousands of ebooks on it. I have no idea how to tell Calibre that those thousands of ebooks are there and for it to start munching on them. I have no idea how to do that. I have no idea how to make it work. It seems entirely self-contained when I download it, so that it will grudgingly read any ebooks that I happen to have directly on my MacBook. Although even there, it often doesn't. The next step in mastering Calibre for me is to figure out how to make it work, how to get it so that it understands that it is connected to an ebook library, so that I can start manipulating that library. That would be great. I'm sure that's very simple. But that's a thing that I obviously need to do. If I'm going to keep amassing ebooks, I obviously need to do that. And then thing number 10 is to continue fine-tuning my printed book library. And that was a goal that I had at the beginning of 2020, and then 2020 happened. And now it's drastically different. 2020 sort of fundamentally shifted the axis of my reading to electronic reading. I was a big fan of ebooks before then, but not anywhere near the kind of preponderance that it has now. And as a result, my printed book library, I don't want to say it's been neglected, because I still love it, and I still prowl around it and pull books down from it. And as you've seen in the haul videos that I've done in the winter, I still add to it. But it's a mess, and it's even more of a mess because I recently had a seismic moving shift here at Hyde Cottage, and once that was all done and the bookshelves were all set up, the books, by very willing hands for whom I am very grateful, the books were just piled onto the shelves. And I did a little fine-tuning. The romances mostly stuck together, and I myself put the literary criticism, the book reviews together. And the Penguins are mostly together, although not sorted. But most of the other books are just flung up onto shelves. And I need to deal with that. I need to assess that, organize everything, neaten it all up, pull out all the excess, get rid of it, that sort of thing. I'm kind of thinking that process I know for a fact is very much helped if it is part of a library tour. So I'm kind of thinking about that for 2021. What would happen if I did a library tour? I effectively do have a new library. The bookshelves are entirely rearranged. Thousands of books are gone that were here. The last time I did a library tour was 2019, right? Yeah. I did a library tour sporadically throughout 2019, and then I did a Penguin Classic tour in 2020. What about another library tour in 2021 that allows me to come to grips with what I have and don't have and what I want and don't want? But one way or another, even if I don't do a library tour, I still need to deal with my library. Very much so. In many different ways, including I've got a bookcase right here in the little book room that is empty. And I want to see, has my printed book consumption decreased so much that I can't fill that bookcase in 1 year? I mean, granted, it's here in the little book room, so it would have to be keepers. But even so, I have one whole bookcase, tall and narrow, here in this room that's empty. And out in the kitchen, I have two enormous bookcases that are empty. They're out in the kitchen, and they're completely empty. They could hold thousands of books. So there's definitely room for the expansion of a physical library, but is there a reason for it if I'm reading so many ebooks? These are all questions that I had in 2020, but asking them, dealing with them, really took a side turn with just the pressing details of 2020. In America, those details were two main ones. One was that America became a global embarrassment, the global hotspot for COVID-19, and is now worse than ever, just worse than ever. Skyrocketing numbers of new cases, hospitalizations, and deaths, just skyrocketing numbers. Like we had no medical infrastructure whatsoever here. That's exactly what it looks like. And recent leaked memos from the Trump White House show that was their goal, was to act as if we have no medical research, act as if we have no infrastructure, let it burn through the population, let lots and lots of people get sick until some sort of herd immunity is achieved. That was curveball number one here in the United States, and curveball number two in the United States, even in the spring when COVID-19 was starting to make headlines, was people wondering more and more pointedly what Donald Trump would do if he lost the 2020 presidential election. Now, back in the spring and the summer, we were thinking, well, a lot of people were thinking, well, he isn't going to lose because the Republicans have been removing polling places and rigging, gerrymandering districts for 4 years, 8 years, 10 years. So it's not possible for him to lose. And then as the pandemic started going wild and he started his manifest incompetence, strongmen, authoritarian strongmen are the worst people at dealing with this kind of thing, because they have to take a back seat. They have to say, I don't know, I'm going to let the experts tell me, and they can't do that because they're cult leaders. Every country that had an authoritarian dictator or wannabe dictator in place had a horrible COVID track record, and the United States had one too, and that started to reflect itself. You can't have a nationwide deadly pandemic shutting down businesses and bankrupting families without people saying the president's responsible. Even if he wasn't, they'd say it. In this case, he was. And as a result, the 2020 election broke in the way that Donald Trump was least likely to accept. He was never going to accept a loss under any circumstances. But this particular kind of loss isn't just professional. It also runs straight against the grain of his megalomania, because the Republicans did quite well in the 2020 election. It was Trump who lost. It was Trump who the people hated and voted out of office. The down ticket didn't suffer. It was the top of the ticket that did. And telling Donald Trump that this election was entirely personal, it wasn't that they liked Joe Biden, it wasn't that they hated their Republican representatives, is that they hated you. That was always going to have a disastrous effect, but I don't think more than a handful of Americans expected how disastrous that effect would be. The President of the United States openly mulling sending troops into states that voted against him in order to force them at gunpoint to vote again, with the unspoken diktat being the outcome had better be different this time, or those guns will be used. And for the ruling political party in the United States, the Republican Party, of whom Donald Trump is the nominal leader, to do nothing about it, to hear credible reporting and firsthand word of mouth from one of the guys in the room about martial law and declaring martial law and forcing the election to go over again. The Republican Party, the Republican majority in the Senate can hear that and do nothing. That is the other curveball that 2020 has thrown to people in the United States. First was a pandemic, and second was an authoritarian coup against the duly elected processes of the government. That in the beginning of 2020, no one could have seen both of those coming. It's certainly not anywhere near the extent that either one of them did. So I had plans and dreams, is what I'm trying to say, at the beginning of 2020. And maybe 2021 will be gentler on all of us. Maybe it will be. That is certainly the theme of a lot of these reading and bookish goal videos that I've been watching. And I'd love to hear your goals. If you have a Booktube channel, I'd love you to make a video, talk about your goals. And if not, I'd love you to sound off in the comments field or email me about what the things are that you're hoping for in the new year. There are glimmers of hope, after all, regardless of martial law or tanks in the streets or whatever. Donald Trump was voted out of office. And a normal person, a flawed, normal person is going to become president in January. Not someone who tells reporters on live cameras that he wants his people to sit up and take orders like they do in North Korea, that he really wishes that were the case here. Someone openly pining to be a dictator will no longer be a factor in the American political landscape in 2021. And there are also vaccines for this virus that has affected all our lives. There are vaccines that seem very promising. And if you can overturn your sheer outrage at the fact that a lot of those Republican political leaders who spent all of 2020 saying this was overblown, that it's the flu, that it's no big deal, that people are whining, that it's a hoax, were the first in line to get those vaccine doses. If you can overlook your outrage at that, a vaccine, or more than one, does present a glimmer of hope. There are glimmers of hope for 2021. And so I wonder what you're making of that, what you're doing with that. Are you making plans yourself? I had fun making this list. It was largely a reflection on 2020, but who knows what the new year will bring. So I'm going to wrap up this daydreaming video for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, Booktube.